Spooner had made some noise. You know, we were pulling in 500 people a night at some of the small clubs in town. It just felt like that's what I wanted to do. It didn't really dawn on me that I was actually doing that full time until a couple years later, after we had established Smart, and then we started getting a lot of work. Had made some noise. You know, we were pulling in 500, and I sort of fell into it. You know, I never actually sat down with a piece of paper or thought to myself, this is exactly what I'm going to do. I literally have been recording or playing with bands since I was 16 years old. So it's in my blood. I'm a studio rat. You know, I can't help it. Can't help myself. I never had any technical training as an engineer or a producer at a school or working at a studio and sort of learning.
Yeah, so
I kind of figured out.
I am, as you can see, having my morning education with Butch Vig. And it's one of the guys that I am recently really looking into, because he wrote, he didn't write, he produced Nevermind with Nirvana, which is an absolute timeless album, and I have to say that when I'm listening to it, it's like, it's really intense. Like, every element in his mix counts. And I'm using his plugins actually since quite a while. And I love them. It's one of my most recommended vocal plugins, for example, the Butch Vig vocals. Vocal processor is actually, I think, the thing that he has in the back there. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, there's a compressor knob, and then here you have present lows and mids. Here you have your high pass. Here you have your low pass. Down here you would have your solid state and your tube. You have your focus. All those neat things that are inside there. It's really such a cool plugin as well, I have to say. Like, for me, I showed it to another producer, but okay, only one, so it doesn't really mean much. But I showed it to another producer. He said, I don't know what you love so much about it. Well, then you probably, you know, are not looking for what I'm looking for. I'm looking for character. So you can work out a lot of character with this plugin. But yeah, let's let Butch Vig talk a little bit more, and I'm going to make a coffee. Gonna be right back.
Been an asset in some ways for me as an engineer and a producer, because like I said, I don't feel precious about, I have to have this microphone, I have to have this preamp. And if the space is funky or sounds weird, you just figure it out. And sometimes, because it's funky and weird, that is a big contributor to the sound and the vibe of the record. So I really believe in kind of embracing that. And so I've taken that to heart in my home studio here. Grunge is Dead in our house here in Silver Lake. It's just it's a bedroom studio. And I've got a really nice Pro Tools system and some good monitors and some good solid gear here, but it's kind of guerrilla style. Everything that you would use in a traditional studio are built inside of your digital system now, and they sound amazing. The modeling has gotten better and better over the last 5 to 10 years. So I can't really even tell a difference between a hardware Pultec and a Pultec that's been modeled in a plug-in. Well, plugins are amazing because there's so much power on the click of a mouse that was hard to attain when I started recording 20 or 30 years ago. When I first started recording, Steve Marker, the guitarist in Garbage, and I built a studio in Madison, Wisconsin called Smart Studios. I don't know if you know any of the history of Smart, but it started out as an 8-track studio and grew to a 16-track, and then eventually a 24-track and a couple rooms. We had a mix room and a track room. But when we built the 8-track studio, it was in a funky warehouse on the east side of Madison, and there was a hopping punk scene in Madison. And Steve and I would go see bands like Killdozer or Tar Babies play and say, hey, if you want to come and record with us, bring a reel of tape and a case of beer and we'll charge you $5 an hour. And we got a lot of work, and it grew and grew over the first 3 or 4 years. That's pretty much all we did was punk bands, but then we started getting more rock bands and country bands and opera singers, and the University of Wisconsin would bring their marching band in, and then we started doing all sorts of projects. And we were able to move the facility from the warehouse across the street to the 1254 East Watch, which is where we were for almost 30 years. That's when we built up a second room. We had Russ Berger from Russ Berger Designs design the control rooms and the studios, and it was a small but funky clubhouse environment, but it was very comfortable, and it had a lot of really good gear. Not a ton of gear, but all the gear was really, we used everything we had. You know, we had good microphones and good guitar amps and drum kits and things, and we were all analog tape for many years. And then I guess probably in the probably around the time we did version 2.0 with Garbage, we started working with Pro Tools, but still continued to use tape. I think Smart was really magical because it was a hang. It was a clubhouse. Everybody who we knew in Madison, being a small town, were all part of the local scene, and everyone kind of supported each other. It wasn't really a competitive, backstabbing kind of environment. It's like people would borrow each other's instruments and help each other sit in on sessions and book gigs together. And sometimes they were, you know, multiple styles of bands playing in these same gigs. You know, you'd have a funky jazz band playing with a hip-hop band playing with a punk band, and it was cool. And the University of Wisconsin has about 50,000 students, so there's always a fresh influx of new musicians and bands. Sometimes they would just last a couple years, but it always felt really creative. We were starving artists, literally. We made no money when we started the studio, and so Steve moved in. We had a used plate reverb we put in the back closet, and he just threw all his clothes back by the plate reverb, and he slept on the floor in there every night for about 6 months till he couldn't take it anymore, and he finally went out and got another apartment. One of the first records I did at Smart was with a band called Killdozer. I went on.
Literally, recently I'm watching this stuff every day. Not this stuff specifically, you know, but like the documentaries about how this album is done, behind the scenes footage from this band, documentary about Prodigy, documentary about Nirvana, documentary about this artist, about that producer. I find it so insightful.
To make 3 or 4 albums with them, and those Killdozer records ended up being a big influence on why I worked with Billy Corgan and why Sub Pop and Nirvana called. Now, Killdozer is an acquired taste. They're dirgy and sludgy, and Mike Gerald, the singer, had this deep, growly voice from hell. They didn't call me up and ask me to produce. We were just in the studio, and they said, well, I guess you're the producer. We're giving you the production credit. And I was like, okay. I don't even really know what that means exactly, but I was starting to help make decisions, like maybe you should do this, maybe that chorus would sound better if you come in halfway through the verse, or maybe the timing isn't right there, maybe you should come up with a different fill, maybe the guitar tone.
How do you, Vimal, I don't fully understand. You mean grid? Do you mean grid? Vocals in grid? Vocals in greed? Not sure what you're saying there, buddy. Maybe you can clarify it, then I can answer the question. If you mean grid, how do you arrange vocals in grid? Well, they have to be they have to be sung in with a click, of course. That's the trick. Like everything has a BPM. Also, every vocal has a BPM. If it's rhythmical, if it's a one shot, then not. But if it's a loop, obviously that would be rhythmical, so it's like adhering to a BPM. The question is just, do you know the BPM or not? If it's some random sample and you don't know the BPM, good luck finding that out. Can be nigh impossible. If it's sung in without a click, without a metronome, forget about it. It's unusable in any rhythmic material. And then usually nowadays there never has been an easier time to work with vocals, because the algorithms are just so much better now than they ever have been. So yeah, it's actually quite easy nowadays.
tones aren't right. I realized that I had a lot of opinions, but I wasn't really trying to force them on the bands I was working with. I was just making suggestions, and they would go, "Oh, that sounds like a good idea." And so I kind of fell into being a producer after just wanting to be an engineer. You know, people trusted what I was saying, I guess, and so almost by default, I started to become a producer. Yeah, I never sat down and went, "I'm going to be a record producer." It just grew out of wanting to be a good engineer and make interesting sounding records, and then just offering up an opinion, and people kept asking me for my opinion, really. Well, there are a lot of different roles in the studio. Obviously, the producer is the person that the artist is hopefully trusting to make a lot of decisions in terms of how the song is going to end up sounding, and hopefully helping them to find their vision. The engineer usually is in charge of making sure everything sounds good, whether it's tracking a live band or an electronic session or hip-hop session, whatever it is, you know, making sure that everything is sounding really good and all glued together, and frequency-wise, that it's not going to become a problem when you're trying to mix the album. And the mixer usually comes in, and whether it's an individual mixer separate, or if it's the producer or the engineer, sometimes one person wears all three of those hats. I know I have worn all three of those hats.
Yeah, nowadays it's very common for the producer also to mix. Not necessarily, but to be honest with you, like projects, they don't necessarily get better from having an infinite amount of people working on them at all given times. It's sometimes way better if just few people, I believe. I mean, I never worked on a project like Nirvana or something like that, but I believe it's probably more beneficial if you have a hand-selected few people. And actually, that by that I mean, it always depends. Is it like a vocal track? Then in this case, for sure, it should be like you will have a songwriter, you will have maybe several band members and instrumentalists who will play the song. But then, okay, engineering wise, what do you have? You have a producer and you have a mastering engineer, and I think that's enough if you have the right people.
But the mixer sometimes comes in and has to have an objective look at what the producer and the engineer have captured in the sessions, and has to have a good gut instinct for trying to find a way to balance it and give it a really good perspective, and make it all really focused. And sometimes a mixer can bring in a focus that the engineer and the producer may be missing because they're too close to it, and they're not objective anymore. And sometimes that's what a great mixer brings into the project, is that they're completely
interesting. But I also like this when it is 7 years ago. Okay, this is relatively contemporary, but he worked a lot in the 90s, and the game was a completely different one back then. That is for sure. Just a different game back then than it is today, without a question. Completely different story. The world has changed. I mean, that is for sure. Nowadays, there are so many independent projects that never could have existed back in the day. Back in a sec.
objective. They're not. They didn't record this guitar part or record these back vocals. So if they mute them and take them out, you know, they don't care. And sometimes that part of what is mixing, part of what producing and engineering is too, is what to leave out. You know, and
Yeah, that is so true. I'm in this dilemma with a lot of stuff now, with a lot of tracks, like, for example, Valle de Parijs. I'm just gonna say it as it's actually pronounced, Valle de Parijs, which is named like that, by the way, because I lived in Valle de Parijs in Idanhanova in Portugal when I was a 3-year-old, just before way before Boom Festival existed, but exactly at the lake where Boom Festival was happening. I lived there for 6 months in a caravan with my family in 1992. And as Rebirth is going a lot back to childhood influences, also childhood trauma actually. Both that track is named as that. For now, maybe I will change the name. Who knows? But for now, it's called Valle du Paraíso. For that reason, it's personal, as so often.
No. So a really good mixer can have really good ideas with that in terms of what is really the important things in the mix, and the important things in the song that need to be focused. To me, a producer should be someone who is objective about what a band's vision is and can nurture that vision. I know for me, I wear multiple hats because when I'm producing the Foo Fighters or Green Day, I have to remember they are the band and it's their vision. And then I wear this hat where I'm in Garbage and I'm a producer, but I'm also a songwriter and I'm a musician. And so that's a whole different thing. And on different days, I am different things in Garbage. But
I have to check out that project, actually. Sounds like worthwhile checking out for sure.
From my point of
I'm going to start to read Rick Rubin's book. How is it called again? Creative something. But it's a must read because this guy is a spiritual birth helper. That's what Rick Rubin is. It's actually what all those guys are, like the classic producers that are not producing their own projects, basically. But, you know, like what am I called correctly? I'm not a DJ. I am a live act, and I am sort of a producer, but I'm also a composer, you know, many other things. The game has changed, as I said, but those guys were spiritual birth helpers, especially Rick Rubin. He's morphing into a guru-like figure, literally a guru-like figure, and he's doing it in a respectable way. And it's like why he has so much appeal is because he doesn't have a lot of ego. He's literally doing that with pure intention because he knows it's time. Okay, like he can give back to humanity in that way. He can share all those things about the creative process and help other people grow. And that's why he's doing it, not for monetary reasons and not for ego reasons. The guy's just very, very pure, and therefore he has such a wide appeal to so many people. Going beyond music producers. If you listen to Rick Rubin, the stuff what he says counts for all creatives from all fields, first of all, and in many cases for all kinds of humans that are not creative as well. So yeah, listening to artists talk can be beneficial not only for artists, I believe.
A producer needs to be someone working with an artist that really understands their vision and then nurtures that whatever it takes. Sometimes it's hand-holding, sometimes it's pushing them, sometimes it's suggesting they need help with the song. They need to rethink the way the song is performed. There's any number of ways. I mean, there's so many different styles of music that there's no set way to produce someone, you know. You have to figure that out when you're working with an artist, what it is that's unique and special about them, and then hopefully you make decisions that help really bring out the best in that artist. I'm pretty hands-on with a project all the way through, from pre-production to tracking, listening to what the engineer is doing or engineering myself, working out all the parts. I mean, a lot of records, I know every single part, every performance that everyone has played, and maybe that's sort of my ADD or my neurotic tendencies or my mild form of autism. I don't know what it is, but I get fixated on things. And I get obsessed with how the mixes sound and how the mastering sounds all the way to the end. I mean, I don't mind delegating in the studio if I'm there to kind of keep an eye on what's going on, but I like to be involved in the process. You know,
by the way, it's so awesome, so freaking awesome that Waves is putting out those series. It's such a huge service. Like, you know, like you gotta love them for that. Obviously, it's what they are doing there is totally promoting their company 1,000,000% of their products. I mean, For example, that the Butch Vig plugin is in the background is absolutely not random, and that it's almost full screen. Normally you're not using that plugin like that. Normally it just takes a tiny little bit of your computer screen. So they are promoting their stuff, of course, but they are doing it in a way where everybody can benefit from it. And this is seriously great. And a lot of those big companies are starting to do that, or not starting to do that. What am I saying? Is actually they're doing that since fucking 10 years. And Waves Audio, for example, many people from nowadays, they don't know that Waves Audio is a company that has been around since the 90s in terms of like putting plugins out. They are at the forefront of development and of R&D when it comes to that sector. It's incredible what they put out, and in how many productions. Literally, if you look at any production in the last 30 years, chances are that Waves Audio is involved there in some way or another through their work with the plugins, because people are using it. The newer versions of Waves plugins often algorithmically are based on early 2000s, late 90s stuff that has been developed, like the Q series, for example. A lot of stuff.
Some producers are amazing at
The psychoacoustic bass enhancers like R-Bass, Max Bass, those things are fucking old. They are not new, you know, like this is old shit. And Waves is just like putting a new coat of paint on it and is selling it, and it's completely fine because the stuff is timeless. It still does the job, you know?
at that, but I need to kind of fixate and focus on the moment at hand, and I think that's made me a better producer, because I listen to everything that's going on and get obsessed with it. You know, sometimes I worry about the subtlest things in a track, and I think it's good.
You can really hear that, in my opinion. You can really hear that Butch Vig is a maniac when it comes to detail work.
At least for me, to be that way, because I think it makes me make better albums. In Garbage, I'm a music producer, I'm a drummer, I'm a songwriter, I'm an engineer, and I'm also in a band. You know, I just play with my bandmates, and I love being able to wear all those different hats. And on any given day, the four of us will wear those hats. Like Shirley is the co-producer because she's more opinionated than I am, quite frankly. All four of us produce, all four of us write. You know, all four of us like to hang around and take the piss out of each other. There's a lot of self-deprecating humor in Garbage, which I think is good. It's kept us going for 20 years, that we don't take ourselves too seriously. But I love being in a band like Garbage, because when I first started playing in bands, I was the drummer. And ultimately, personally, I just found that boring. And because I like playing guitar, I like playing piano, I like getting sounds, and I like writing songs, I like engineering, and I like making production decisions. And in Garbage, I get to do all of those. And I think that's one of the reasons that Garbage has survived for 20 years, is that all of us get that out of the band. We all have different roles that we get to play. And so ultimately, that gives you a lot of avenues to be creative. Whereas if you only have one role in a band, I think ultimately that can get stifling. And so I recommend it, if you can do that in a band, to be able to wear different hats, you know, be able to have different roles, because it keeps life interesting. The first thing I focus on when I hear a song usually is the hook. That could be a vocal line, it could be a guitar riff at the start of the song, it could be the feel of the track, like the groove of the drums and bass. It could be a weird sound. Sometimes a song will start and there's not singing for 30 seconds or 45 seconds. You know, there's 8 bars or 16 bars or however long of letting the music flow. And so something draws you in, whether it's the beat or a melody or a sound. And that's what's cool about music. There's no one thing that pulls the listener in. You know, each artist, when they write a song, it's going to be
Yeah, that's so true. Like, for example, an epic start to a track. What can that be? 1 million things. It could be like pop. It's starting because the track is requiring to go full power in. It could be that there's just like a piano and it's like slowly crawling up. It could be that there is a bass which is slowly crawling up. It could be that there is silence and everything happens very slowly and develops out of silence. That's something that is not very much used in psytrance for some reason anymore. And there are those things, you know, like there's 1 million things that you can do. What is an epic start to a track? 1 million answers to that question, without a doubt. God damn it, this coffee. So what I have to do, why I'm always having to run to the kitchen, is like, I'm having an induction stove, but my mocha thingy is not compatible with induction. So what I have to do is put the mocha thingy on top of the pan, which is very wasteful, I know, and do my coffee like that. And oh my god, it takes ages sometimes. Be right back.
Unique song unto itself, and if you've got a good hook, whatever that hook is, it's gonna draw you into the song for the entirety of that song. You know, it's funny, when I'm working with an artist and a song comes to fruition, it's usually right when the lead vocal has been sung. Maybe the song's not finished, there may be more music that needs to be recorded. It could be in a very rough form. But there's a point when I start playing a rough mix over and over and over again, in its raw form, that's, to me, is when the song is done, and that's the most exciting part of it. A lot of times, by the time I finish a track, you know, when you've added all the extra bells and whistles and gone back and mixed it and had it mastered and then tweaked anything and gone back and had it mastered again, I'm kind of burned out on it. I usually put it aside, and I have to wait about 6 months to go back and sort of appreciate the song. But there's that moment right when it gels that is pure magic to me. And I know it when it happens because, like I said, it may be a rough mix. It's not even, it doesn't sound very good. But the core of the song.
The title is also quite cool. Actually, why am I not subscribed to Waves? That's like embarrassing almost. Because they put out so much good stuff, right? So it's literally, why would people not take that offer? It's so inspiring to listen from those people. I mean, yeah, it's just great. Same thing with FabFilter, same thing with Ozone, same thing with, you name it, basically. Where like there is a certain like size of audio companies also, they were growing like a lot in the last 20 years, of course, all of those companies. If you invested into R&D and development of plugins, sound plugins in the last 20 years, you probably made some money. And they did, and they're reinvesting it wisely. I love that. I love that because it's useful. It's as simple as that. There's like benefit. So, you know, you can promote a product just like that. Or you can promote a product and make everybody benefit. Definitely. Make everybody benefit, of course.
Is there, and I can hear what the song is about. And also my point at that point in the song, my brain can imagine how it's going to sound. And sometimes it doesn't end up sounding that way. But for that one moment where you're listening to that rough mix, it's pure magic because the song has come to fruition. And that's a magical thing. Whether it's a really minimally produced track or whether it's a over-the-top, overproduced track, and I'm certainly guilty of that with some of the bands I work with and sometimes in garbage. But the song has to have a...
Yeah, same here. It's funny because I worked on some tracks months and on some tracks hours, and there is no way in telling which one is the better approach. There is no better approach. It's all the same. It's all like, okay, what does this piece need or doesn't need? But overproduction is a very common thing. And it makes me think about my own productions, of course. Fuck. You know, what means overproduced? Overproduced means that you are going beyond the sweet spot of the mix or of the work. Of the, like, can be a lot of things, but let's say it's about the mix. Yeah, you're going beyond. So, like, there is a point where a painting would be very beautiful, and if the painter keeps on painting over and over and over every detail again and again and again, it just will become more distorted, the original vision becomes more distorted. It's funny how useful, precious those original mixes are often. That's why you will never find a project folder from me with only one project file. That's nonsense. Everybody should have learned that by now also, that you have to constantly save new versions of your work as a music producer, simply to be able to go back. So that doesn't mean that you throw all the work back away. Let's say you are at version 15 and you're going back to version 10 and you hear, okay, version 10 is better than 15. You're not dropping 15. What you can do is you can take 10, for example, as a reference point and bring 15 back to 10. Bring version 15 back to 10 from the mix, keep all the other stuff intact, like the detail work, the arrangement, etc. That's a good way. It's like, okay, I'm orientating on the best point of the process, but I'm keeping everything what happened until then, which is valuable, of course. Don't keep the bad stuff, keep the good stuff. I'm keeping that alive and just updating the mix, downgrading the mix basically to where it has been good, which is a good tactic.
Emotional connection for me. So when I'm getting an emotional connection out of it, then all of the fairy dust stuff doesn't really matter that much. Like, is that little hi-hat thing in the bridge, is that loud enough? No one really cares about that anyway. It's really coming down to sort of the core of the track, the groove and the sound of the production and the...
Yeah. It's another interesting point that he brings up there, is that you are perceiving your music entirely different from other people. I know that from when I'm working on stuff for days and then I'm like showing different version to people, and it's like, for them it's all the same. You know, you put 20 hours more into the mix, for them it's all the same. Because it's not about that, it's about the core idea. Is the core idea gripping? Does it have a hook? Does it have, you know, something that draws you in as a listener? Or as a dancer, depends on what the track is actually designed for. Then this is what people focus on. And if those ideas, those core ideas are served well, people are willing to almost ignore everything else. How loud is the snare? Is it -10? Is it -12? How loud is the hi-hat? Is it -14? Is it -17? They don't care. Like, but in the end, fidelity is something that is a real thing. Audio quality and audio fidelity. A sore mix will sound especially bad on high volumes, while a brilliant mix will never sound bad. You want to pump up those volumes to a proper degree, and you don't have any bad interactions in between stuff, and you want to make it loud. A good mix, a good master, you would want to make it loud. You would want to hear those details. Also, when I listening to Butch Vig's productions, like Something in the Way, for example, or Smells Like Teen Spirit, or all those tracks from Nevermind, actually, it's like, it's almost eerily beautiful in a way, eerily melancholic. It's like when I'm listening to stuff like Something in the Way, it puts me to tears sometimes. I'm very susceptible to getting emotional with sound, you know, super susceptible. I can listen to Vivaldi and start to cry in the right moment, or get really heavy goosebumps or something like that. But it's a beautiful thing. I appreciate it for sure. I know that it's not with everybody, that the reaction, how emotional and how intense the reaction to music is, varies from person to person. Of course, as a musician, it's very helpful to have a strong reaction to sound.
And the singing, you know, are you getting some kind of connection? So when I'm getting an emotional response from the song that way, then I know the song is done. Music is an experience that...
Yeah, exactly. It all starts with you. If you are not getting goosebumps in the studio, nobody will.
You can take with you for your whole life. If you hear a song when you were falling in love when you were 16, and you hear that song 20 years later, you might go back to where you were and how you felt emotionally at that time. And that's one of the amazing things about music, is that it has this ability to almost put an imprint in your brain like a time capsule, and can give you this emotion that you can feel connected with tomorrow or 20 years later. And it's different than other art forms. Like if you read a book, a great novel, you're probably not going to read that novel every day or 10 times a day like you do with a great song, like you listen to a great song. Or you go see a film. Now, it may be an incredible 2-hour experience of a film, and you might go and see it 2 or 3 times. If it was Titanic, you might go see it 10 times, if you were a teenage girl, apparently. But music is really an art form that can be experienced over and over and over again. And I think that's one of the great things about it. It has an emotional bond with the listener that you can continue to experience. And that is very, very powerful.
Wow, what a cool video, guys. That is so cool. Let's see what they have. Manny American.
Hi, I'm Dave Darlington, an engineer in New York City. Today we're going to talk about the Manny American bundle. Manny American's bundle consists of 6 plugins, and I'd like to start with the EQ, which is an essential part of any engineer's toolbox. You can see it here on the screen. We've got 4 bands with fixed frequency points, cut and boost and mute in each frequency, and then we have a high-pass filter, a low-pass filter, and an input and an output control. Couldn't be simpler. The great thing about this EQ is the frequency points where the EQ notches are. Obviously, Manny's a world-class engineer, and with a long career, he's had access to some of the most sought-after hardware there is on the planet. And what happens with engineering is you find yourself going to a certain tool for a certain job over and over again. So Manny chose particular frequencies modeled after the hardware that he goes to over and over again to do certain particular jobs. It makes it easy for you because the sweet spots are already there. You just find which sweet spot is working for the job that you're trying to do.
This is like a little bit of not really... I don't really believe in what he's saying there, I have to say. Like, this is like the one-fits-all solution. How do you improve your kick drum? Just boost it on 100 hertz. That's complete nonsense. Where's the fundamental of the kick? Like, where are the overtones of the kick? Where, like, of the sound? It's nonsense. It's not like every sound needs a cut or boost at 227 hertz. It's not a thing. One sound will need a cut there, another one at 300 something, another one at 600 something, another one at 800, another one at 60. It's like there is no one-fits-all solution in music production. Not happening. So, not really agreeing with this approach. It's like, it's so cool. You just have to look which knob is so cool, is the best for you. Yeah. Not sure if I want to watch this. Also, I don't know who this is, actually. Guys, peace out for now. Maybe I go live later or something. I don't know. I think I'm gonna log out for now. Thanks for the people that dropped in. And I see you guys soon, I guess. Cheers. Peace out.